So I wanted to show you a few examples of the American cloth dolls that we have. Most of them from the Jacqueline Barr collection, some from the Linda Levy collection, and just really some great examples. We're going to be looking at the Schoenhut dolls in a moment, and I want you to think about these all being kind of concurrent with each other. The whole American philosophy of doll making as it developed was durability, was a child's plaything, it's something a child could relate to, not to be so much an emblem of fashion, but something that could be carried out in the yard and sit and play with the dog, and then you have your doll in your lap and you're playing and you're not worried about something happened to it. It was kind of a different, it almost symbolized to me, and I know I'm probably simplifying it when I say this, but it almost has symbolized to me the difference in lifestyle of America in the 1890 to 1920 period than that of Europe, which was much more still very, very formal. But so just look at some of these dolls. Now, in choosing American cloth dolls, people look for, they look for style, they look for personality, they look for artistry to some extent, but they also look for a doll that really projects something. What we had were American women that were able to begin their industries, their businesses, by starting these cloth studios, many of them starting them in their home, some of them working individually, never even having a studio, but just producing some output. A lot of them being the work of a charity organization, a women's church group, for example, that would get together and they would sew dolls and they would sell them, and they would raise money for their various charitable services that they were performing. So I have here just a group. Of course, the pivotal dream of every American cloth doll collector is to own an Izana Walker. And we have had two of them come to us in this auction, which I thought were quite interesting because of their different type of looks they have. Now, both of them, I will tell you, have craquelure, much like an oil painting that would have been done at the time, that would hang over your mantle, and as time went on, the canvas and the oil would dry to some extent and develop a series of little lines in them. And that's what both of these have, but to me that adds to the enchantment of these pieces. So if it bothers you, then it bothers you. But if you really know and understand these pieces, you know it kind of comes with the territory. Little stitched on ears. This is a very, very interesting one. She has a wonderful early costume. She even has, and I noted it in the description, at some point she must have had a little damage to the back of her head, but someone very carefully sewed the patch back in and then secured it so it would not break off. And that's the fun thing about all of these cloth dolls. You can enjoy them for their wonderful folk art qualities, and they're just most appealing. The one here is very interesting because she has a blue sateen body cover, which is very, very rare to find, undoubtedly made at a slightly different period than the other doll. Izana Walker was in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and she was the Ben Franklin of women, and that's about what it amounted to. She was always inventing things, designing things, and there's the famous story about how she sat, when she was doing the doll, she was trying to figure out a way how she could make it and not have it be destroyed, and that she woke up one night in the middle of the night and sat up in bed and said, "Eureka," and she had figured out the way to have the oil painted finish so that child could play with it and it would not be destroyed. A real story of American female entrepreneurship in the end of the 1800s, and an important doll in every doll collector's. They're wonderful dolls. We have here the Columbian Doll, which also to me is another wonderful story of the American doll, and I love it because up until this time, every time there was an international trade exposition in the world, Paris or London, it was always the French that won the prizes, the gold ribbon, the Médaille d'Or. Well, then we had the Columbian Exposition in 1893, celebrating the anniversary of Columbus discovering America, so we thought at the time. And that was the international fair, exposition in which all of the doll makers exhibited their dolls once again, including the French doll makers. And guess what happened? An American won. The gold medal, we didn't call it Medal d'Or because it was in America. We called it gold medal, which is English for a doll d'Or. And it was an American who won it, Emma Adams, for her doll that became known as the Columbian Doll. She was from New York State, and she and her sister worked in their studio and undoubtedly had the help of other people and created these wonderful, wonderful oil-painted pieces of art. This is a beautifully preserved one. Absolutely wonderful. One of the things that they were always concerned with was how to construct the head for greater disability and greater ability to be preserved. And look at the way the head is constructed there. You can see the seam around the face where there's almost like a little gathering, and then the straight seams going back to the crown. And so when you see the doll standing upright, it's almost like a little hump and then a rounded back to the head. Emma Adams, Columbian Doll, 1893, winner of the gold medal, and also a winner of a blue ribbon here, this particular one. Then we have the doll known as the Shepherd Baby. Shepherd Baby, or the Philadelphia Baby. He appeared, there's a lot of mystery surrounding him. He appeared at the Philadelphia department store, J.B. Shepherd, in the early part of the 1900s. And why he appeared, we don't know. It was almost like there was some research has come out that there was a contest among students of one of the art institutes in Philadelphia at the time to create a doll, and they were using it to display baby clothes in the store. None of this is absolutely verified. Folks, more research needs to be done. There's so much research that can be done on some of these early dolls, and we just need to get at it and get into these primary sources that now are suddenly so available to us. All right, now I'm going to turn him around so you can see his back. I love his little, her little costume. I don't know, to me the Shepherd Baby's always a boy, but that's a good thing about a doll. You can have it be a boy or a girl, however you want. Look at how beautifully it was made. Again, this is very, very firmly pressed and oil painted, but look at the sculpting they did, how deeply those eyes are actually impressed into it. Very, very fine definition of the eye sockets and the eyeliner. Great doll. Love the Shepherd Babies, one of my favorites. Alabama Baby in a very rare brown complexion. We have the Alabama Baby. It was done in Roanoke, Alabama, and again, a woman who was had her small studio basically in her backyard. And she had local people, local women helping her, and she created these dolls. So many of these female doll makers began as making a doll for their child. Then a friend saw it and said, "Oh, I love that. Could you make one for me, for my child?" So she did. And then a store would see it and said, "Oh, we'll order some, we'll take some if you can make them." And that's how their business grew in many cases. They didn't start out to be an entrepreneur, they became one. And it morphed from being a mother to making a doll for their child and then having an industry. All right. Then we have the wonderful Maggie Bessie doll, known as the Maggie Bessie doll, or the Moravian church doll, because this was one of the dolls that was made in the Carolinas, and it was made as a charity doll to raise funds for the local missionary group. And two sisters were the kind of the leaders of this organization, Maggie and Bessie. So why the doll is clearly known as Maggie Bessie. Here it is in wonderful condition. The doll was made over a period of many, many years, so you'll find earlier examples than this that are very, very faded and worn, very much more simplistic. And then you'll find later examples that are, how can I say, just much more simple, but because they continued to make them. This, what I would consider, would be the high point of the making of the Maggie Bessie doll and true artistry in the painting of her face. And then a doll that many of you will not recognize if you just looked at it now, because you find so few of them that people don't know who it is. But this was made by Gertrude Rawlinson of Holyoke, Massachusetts. And again, very, very hard, cloth covered, and painted features, but very firmly structured. And to me, looks so much like early composition dolls, but it's not. It was a cloth studio doll made by Gertrude Rawlinson, never really got going too much. You find so few of these dolls, which makes it a great rarity to have in the whole lineage of American cloth dolls. I am so proud to show these dolls to you that were made by Sasha Morgenthaler. We have so few of them ever become available to us, if we're lucky, 1 or 2 a year from her early studio dolls. And here we have an outstanding collection. So I'm just really eager to show them to you and tell you a little bit about Sasha Morgenthaler, because I know so many of you know nothing about her because the dolls are so very, very rare to find. Sasha Morgenthaler was born in 1893 in Bern, Switzerland. She was born into an aristocratic and intellectual family. They were artists, they were teachers, they were scholars, and she had very early blossomed into having a very artistic eye herself, and had studied in some of the finest art schools in Switzerland, and was studying to be a sculptor. She, as happens to a lot of women, got married, and her husband's career took precedence over hers, and she was in the home. And she started off by making a few dolls for her children, and people loved them and admired them, and the story goes on from there, as I was just talking to you about the American cloth doll makers. She eventually had her own studio, and she would make perhaps up to 200 dolls a year. They became so famous, so sought after, so highly artistic, that it is said, the story is told, that every year at Christmas, people knew that she was going to give so many to each small art store, and they would line up in the early morning hours right before Christmas, the day they knew that she would be bringing her dolls to sell. She not only was artistic, she was also a social activist. And she, for example, took early courses in midwifery. And that's one of the reasons she invented another doll. I'm not showing it here now, but it is in the catalog, called her Projuvenate doll. And it was a weighted baby doll that could be used to teach young girls how to be nurses or midwives. And who does that remind you of? Yes, Martha Chase and Kathy Cruz, both of whom moved out of their child dolls production to make that type of a weighted doll to teach nursing skills. So to me, I love these kind of cross studies that you can see from people. Now, let's talk about the dolls themselves. I know I've heard people say they all look alike. Well, I'm here to tell you they do not all look alike, and you have to look at them. She had some really, really strong principles that she used in the making of her dolls. First of all, every one was hand-painted, and it is said that she waited to actually paint the eyes on the dolls until they were wigged and costumed, and she could look at them and get a vision of what, in her mind, the eyes would look like, both in color, in size, and in shape. So each one was its own individual work of art. And here's the really important thing. Think about all of the dolls you have. In fact, think about you as a collector. You go in and you look at a doll and you say, oh, that doll I might look a little crooked, or this or that, because dolls are always symmetrical. Everything is completely uniform. Right eye, left eye, exactly alike. Everything must be correct. But that's not how people are. And she knew that. So when she designed her dolls, her edict that she went on was the principle that dolls' faces need to be asymmetric, just like people's faces. And she was very, very strong in that whole thing. So when you look at her dolls, you will start to see that. The faces are not uniform. They're different, just like people's. We might have one eye a little bit bigger than the other. One corner of our mouth might tilt up and the other doesn't. And that's the type of thing she was looking for. And another thing, and we can tell this because many of the dolls are signed in the bottom of the feet, and they'll give you various codes like what the face model was. There were 4 different face models, by the way, major face models that could vary within it. However, the body, there were 20 different, or the painting of the complexion, I beg your pardon, the painting of the complexion of the face and the body, there were 20 different skin tones that could be used. When you first look at them, you tend to think it's all the same complexion, but it's not. She really worked hard to develop very, very many artistic kind of looks. She ended up creating absolutely works of art. I mean, there's so few of them that become available on the market. To find them in their original clothing is a work of art. After her husband died in the 1960s, she was approached by the German firm of Gotz, G-O-T-Z, who wanted to know if they could do more commercial production of her dolls. And she agreed that they could, although she oversaw it to great extent. And I have some examples of the early Gotz dolls that were made, which are also absolute treasures. They're not as unique as her individual dolls, but they're wonderful and they're highly desirable. And this wonderful collection we have has 4 great examples, and I want to show you. Look at their little faces. They are so cute. My granddaughter just came in and she said, "Oh, I love the costume she's wearing." And I said, "Well, that's because that was a costume called London, and that was the hippie costume of its day back in the 60s. So it's all back in style again now." But here we go. Look at these their faces. Look at their little, I'm going to turn the profile. Look at the nose on here. And the nose, some of them are known as the no-nose dolls because their nose is so tiny and flattened that very, very distinctive kind of look. I think she's beautiful. You look for different things like the rarity of the hair is all embedded. And so you'll look for pieces like, look at the doll with the side parted hair here. That's very, very rare to find. And then this is a beautiful, solemn face on this girl. The Gotz were all presented with, and many of them still have them. They don't all have them, but many of them still do the original wrist tags on there. These are all from the Linda Levy collection she did a wonderful job of collecting and preserving and saving all of these dolls. It's a real treasure because I can tell you, you could wait 20 years before you'll ever see this number of them come up for auction again. And I consider being able to handle the dolls made by Sasha Morgenthaler so rare. You'll find wonderful information online. There's lots of Sasha chat rooms. You might try to join some and talk to people. And here's a great book, which is out of print and really expensive if you can find it. But if you can, I recommend that you do get it. It has wonderful biographical information about her, too, about her sort of art culture life that she lived in Switzerland at the turn of the century, she and her husband, and many, many interesting philosophical stories and wonderful photographs of the dolls and a whole biographical itinerary of her life. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you thank you so much for tuning in. Do you think you saw a lot of dolls just now? What I need to tell you is this. There are 600 dolls in the November 6 and 7 auction. You've only seen the tip of the iceberg. Wonderful pieces, lots of novelties, dolls, playthings, toys, great treasures. Please join us for those 2 days. You'll find us a live audio video feed the whole time with lots of good laughter and bidding and fun. And we welcome your telephone bids and your absentee bids if you can't be on the internet. You can call us with any questions you have, and if you want to come in to examine the dolls prior to the auction, please call us. We'll make an appointment for you to come in for a preview of the dolls. We welcome seeing you, and thank you very much for watching and listening to these. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.